I'm quite out of practice at speaking in public in these last few years since I died in 1991. My name is Robert Greenleaf. I was born in 1904 and attended college right after high school, attended Carleton College right here in Minnesota. Majored in math. Kind of odd preparation for my eventual career. So it must have been in about 1926 that I was in my senior year. As late as the last half year of college, I wasn't quite without a vocational aim. I knew that on graduation I would work at something, but I was not much concerned about what it would be. In due course, I assured myself I would give that matter some attention, but the only certainty I had was I wanted no more formal education. I'd settle for a bachelor's degree. One day, in the course of a rambling lecture, my old professor made a statement along these lines. There is a new problem in our country. We are becoming a nation that is dominated by large institutions, churches, businesses, governments, labor unions, universities. All these big institutions are not serving us well. I hope that all of you will be concerned about this and do as I do, stand outside and criticize and bring pressure if you can, write and argue about it. All of this may do some good. But nothing of substance will happen unless there are people inside these institutions who are able to and want to lead them into better performance for the public good. Some of you ought to make careers inside these big institutions and become a force for good from the inside. So I joined AT&T, at that time the largest corporation on earth, and I stayed for some 40 years, starting out putting telephone poles in the ground because that's what people did. It was part of getting new hires into the culture. And I ended in about 1964 as the Director of Management Research. Oddly enough, each of the positions I held over the course of 40 years at AT&T did not really exist before I held them, except for one position I had for about 4 years. Well, when I left, I started a nonprofit which I called the Center for Applied Ethics. Its name was subsequently changed to the Robert Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. Let me tell you how that came about. Near the end of my career, I came upon a book by Hermann Hesse called Journey to the East. In it, a band of pilgrims were on a journey along with a servant named Leo. Things went along pretty well with Leo making the arrangements for lodging and food and handling the baggage and so forth. Then one morning, Leo was gone, and things kind of fell apart. There was bickering and finger-pointing and acrimony. Pilgrimage quickly abandoned. And some years later, one of the pilgrims came across Leo, who was found to be a person of great renown and a teacher. And it seems that Leo, the nominal servant, had in fact been the leader of the pilgrimage. The servant, the leader. I adopted that phrase to describe my philosophy of leadership, and I brought that philosophy to my joint appointment to the Harvard and MIT business schools, and later teaching positions at Dartmouth College and the University of Virginia. In this story, leadership was bestowed upon a man who was by nature a servant. It was something given or assumed, and it could be taken away. His servant nature was the real man, not bestowed, not assumed, and not to be taken away. He was a servant first. I want to suggest to you that a new moral principle is emerging which holds that the only authority deserving one's allegiance is that which is freely and knowingly granted by the led to the leader, in response to and in proportion to the clearly evident servant nature of the leader. Those who choose to follow this principle will not casually accept the authority of existing institutions. Rather, they will freely respond only to individuals who are chosen as leaders because they are proven and trusted as servants. To the extent that this principle prevails in the future, the only truly viable institutions will be those that are predominantly servant-led. An institution, after all, consists of a band of people who have come together to work towards some common goal. What about that goal? Well, as long as one is leading, one always has a goal. It may be a goal arrived at by group consensus, or the leader acting on inspiration may have simply said, let's go that way. But the leader always knows what it is and can articulate it for any who are unsure by clearly stating and restating the goal. The leader gives certainty and purpose to others who may have difficulty in achieving it for themselves. The word goal here is used in a special sense of an overarching purpose, the big dream, the visionary concept, the ultimate consummation of which one approaches but never really achieves. It is something presently out of reach. It is something to strive for, to move toward, to become. It is so stated that it excites the imagination and challenges people to work for something they can be proud of, even as they move toward it. Not much happens without a dream. And for something great to happen, there must be a great dream. Behind every great achievement is a dreamer of great dreams. Much more than a dreamer is required to bring it to reality, but the dream must be there first. So the dream offers a challenge. As we strive toward meeting that challenge, we'll have to be in communication with each other. We have to stay in touch. I suggest that we can best stay in touch through engaging in dialogue. During dialogue, you may talk while others listen. You may listen while others talk. Sometimes, however, no one will talk. I grew up in a Quaker environment where silence, no one talking, was part of our tradition. One must not be afraid of a little silence. Some find silence awkward or oppressive, but a relaxed approach to dialogue will include the welcoming of some silence. It's often a devastating question to ask oneself, but it is sometimes important to ask it anyway. In saying what I have in mind, will I really improve on the silence? During that silence, I can reflect on what I've heard and thought and felt. The ability to withdraw and reorient oneself, if only for a moment, presumes that one has learned the art of systematic neglect, to sort out the more important from the less important, and the important from the urgent, and to attend to the more important, even though there may be penalties and censure for neglect of something else. I called my organization the Center for Applied Ethics. Let me briefly expand on ethics, and particularly the application of ethics in the exercise of leadership. The failure or refusal of a leader to foresee may be viewed as an ethical failure, because serious ethical compromise today, when the usual judgment on ethical inadequacy is made, is sometimes the result of a failure to make the effort to act at an earlier date, to foresee today's events and take right actions when there was still freedom and initiative to act. Foresight is the lead that the leader has. Once leaders lose this lead and events start to force their hands, they are leaders in name only. They are not leading, but they're reacting to immediate events, and they probably will not long be leaders. So we have our society, we have our institutions, we have our leaders, and then we have the other members of the institutions. This is my thesis. Caring for persons, the more able and the less able, serving each other, is the rock upon which a good society is built. Whereas, until recently, caring was largely person to person. Now, most of it is mediated through institutions, often large, complex, powerful, impersonal, not always competent, sometimes corrupt. If a better society is to be built, one that is more just and more loving, one that provides greater creative opportunity for its people, then the most open course is to raise both the capacity to serve and the very performance as servant of existing major institutions by new regenerative forces operating within them. The regenerative forces implies that things change. An organization is kind of a paradox, you see. For optimal performance, a large institution needs administration for order and consistency, and leadership, so as to mitigate the effects of administration on initiative and creativity, and to build team effort to give these qualities extraordinary encouragement. Not administration or leadership, but administration and leadership. And here's another paradox. The prime force for achievement through service in any large organization is a senior administrative group with an optimal balance between operators and conceptualizers. In a large institution, the council of equals with a primus inter pares, that's Latin for first among equals. Primus inter pares serves best when it is predominantly conceptual. Whoever in the council has the greatest team-building ability should be the primus. even though someone else may have a higher sounding formal title. The achievement of such optimal balance is hindered by a stubborn fact. Whereas conceptualizers generally recognize the need for operators, the reverse is often not the case. More importantly, I firmly believe that a top leadership team of equals, with a primus in our major institutions, will grow more leaders faster than any other course available to us. Leaders are not trained. They are competent people to begin with, and they can be given a vision in a context of values. Beyond that, they need opportunity and encouragement to grow. Now, whose job is it to create the next generation of leaders? If they can't be trained but are rather competent people who only need to be encouraged, what does that mean? Do we choose only the most highly competent? No. Ordinarily, we think of competence as a linear good out to infinity, but that's not so. A critical disability that goes with expanding competence is the inability or unwillingness to examine the assumptions by which one operates. We are a nation rich in resources, but I fear that when historians of some future age try to sort out the artifacts of our present times, one of the questions they may ask is, how could we have supported the vast aggregate of society-building institutions, churches, schools, foundations, and allowed them so studiously to avoid the one service that would have assured a great and long and durable future for our particular civilization? By that I mean preparing those of the young who are capable of it for responsible roles as servants. Preparing the young for responsible roles as servants is neither expensive nor difficult to do, but it is not now the focus of very much explicit effort. It seems not to be the work of our churches or our schools or our foundations, and certainly not of our businesses. Businesses, and especially large businesses, as my old professor pointed out, have been with us since the beginning of the 1900s. Businesses, despite their crassness and occasional corruption and unloveliness, must be loved if they're to serve us better. They are much too large a presence in all of our lives to have them in our midst and not have them serve us better. But how, one may ask, can one love this abstraction called the corporation? One doesn't. One loves only the people who are gathered to render the service for which the corporation is enfranchised. The people are the institution. When the business manager who's fully committed to this ethic is asked, "What are you in business for?" the answer may be, "I'm in the business of growing people. People who are stronger and healthier, more autonomous, more self-reliant, more competent. Incidentally, we also make and sell things at a profit that people want to buy so we can pay for all this. We play that game hard and well, and we are successful by the usual standards, but that's really incidental. The business of growing people who understand that leaders are servants. Growing people who are learning people, who are continually students. Part of the ambiguity that students need to learn to deal with in the course of their preparation to serve and be served by the present society is that it is a high form of art to ask the right questions. But it is also unrealistic to expect that someone else has the answer for them. One must accept that only by venturing into uncertainty with faith, that if one is adequately prepared to deal with ambiguity in the situation, the answers to the questions will come. The certainty one needs to face the demanding situations of life does not lie in having answers neatly cataloged in advance of experience. That, in fact, is the formula for failure. How do we know whether we are succeeded in serving the others in organizations? What's the test of success? Well, the best test and the most difficult to administer is, do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in our society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? Thanks for your attention, and good luck.